Children, as I told you earlier, the French society was divided into three estates. The first estate consisted of the clergy, that is the church. The second estate, the nobility, that means the nobles and the royal family and their relatives. And the third estate consisted of big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers. There are also peasants and artisans, small peasants, landless labor, servants. All these consisted of the third estates. Now, you see, earlier these peasants and workers, you can see the bottom part, participated in revolt due to increase in taxes and food scarcity, but they lacked the resources. Now, those who were in the third estate who became prosperous, like the big businessmen, merchants, okay, and they had access to education and new ideas. So now we see here that there was in the 18th century, we see an emergence of a social group, a middle class, who had earned wealth through overseas trade and manufacturing goods and another profession. So you can see big businessmen now, they are taking the lead because the small peasants and artisans and landless labor, they lack the resources. So now these businessmen who earn profits were now a new group, a new social group had emerged, which was a new middle class, who now wanted to challenge the nobility and the clergy. So children, we go ahead to the next topic of your lesson, that is a growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. Now they want to encounter and do away with the privileges that the clergy and the nobility were enjoying. Okay, and they wanted to protest against the increasing taxes and food scarcity, and so that everyone gets food security in the country, everyone gets food to eat. So they wanted to challenge that. Okay, as I told you, that there was a new social group emerging, who were the merchants, and they had gathered a lot of wealth through trade, through manufacturing goods, and they were in other professions. They started getting money, and this middle class, which was growing, this educated middle class, because they had access to it, they had money and they got educated and new ideas. They believed that no group should be privileged by birth. Just because the nobility, they are born in the noble family, they get all the privileges. No, it should not be by birth. But a person's social position should or must depend on his merits. Okay? And that was the idea that was floating among these growing middle class. Okay? And they wanted to put an end to all the privileges that were given to the nobility and the clergy, that is the first estate and the second state, just because they were born in that state by birth. See here that this new middle class that was emerging, the new social group, which was termed as the middle class. Okay, they had new ideas and they wanted to throw away the clergy and the nobility, and through their ideas and education and earning wealth, now they had a great they were rising in their social position also, and they were inspired by different ideas of philosophers that were writing through their books and newspapers. Okay, so there was this. Now we will see the major role of this new middle class that was rising in France and their role in the French Revolution. Children, as I told you, that this new social group, the new growing middle class, which were now educated, had access to education and new ideas, they were inspired by some ideas put by the philosophers, and who believed that no group should be privileged by birth, and a person's social position must depend on his merit. And they were so inspired by their ideas that they would discuss these philosophers' ideas in saloons, in coffee houses and marketplaces, and they would even read aloud for those who could not read or write. Okay, we look into some of the ideas of some of the philosophers. One of them is John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay. Children, now these philosophers played an important role in getting the people united and motivating them to protest against the king. Okay, and these both gave ideas. You can see John Locke and Rousseau gave ideas that there should be a society where everyone has the freedom and all laws must be equally implemented on everyone, like we have the rule of law in our country, where that is equality before law. Okay, and we'll just look into the details of what these philosophers had actually told the people. Children, now you can see that Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he wrote a book on social contract, and he wrote that there must be a government leader who would listen to the problems of the common man. That means like a democratic form of government. Okay, then we have another philosopher who was called as Montesquieu, and he suggested that the government should have three branches, and the power should be divided among the three. This you have already learned. There should be a constitution where the powers are divided. It should be among the legislative, executive, and judiciary. And John Locke also, he wrote a book called The Two Treatises of Government, where he criticized the divine and absolute right of the monarchy. So you see, with these kind of ideas, they were discussed among people all over the place, all over, whether it was a tea stall or a marketplace or a saloon, they would discuss these ideas. So you see that this intensified the feeling of doing away with monarchy in France. Here you can see I have given a short note on the three philosophers that we have discussed. It's John Locke and Rousseau and Montesquieu. John Locke wrote a book on the two treatises of the government. Okay, Rousseau, you can see here, he wrote a book on social contract, and Montesquieu, the spirit of law. Okay, so these were the, you can see the notes are given for these three philosophers that are given in your book. Okay, the feeling of protest against the king intensified further when they heard the news that Louis XVI had planned to impose further taxes on the third estate. So that's when the anger began.